Got it.
Go.
What if I would have hit
Hello,
leave?
everybody.
What if I would have hit leave meeting?
What happens if you hit leave meeting?
Yeah.
It takes you out. You leave.
Hey, are we live?
We're live now.
Listen. I gotta go full PSA. I gotta go full disclaimer. Listen, if I look like this or I look like this, I'm trying to figure out how to hide my baseball tournament forehead because I look like a unicorn. I think I gotta. My hat gives me a mark. So if you see me moving my head all around, I haven't gone off the deep end. I'm trying to hide my unicorn baseball forehead, man.
I think it's a distraction you're trying to create so people don't actually listen to what we're doing.
I'm just gonna talk like this today. Okay.
There you go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the OGRE Network podcast with Aaron and myself, Ed. So what are we going to talk about today? Because last week we skipped because it was spring break. You were out doing your thing. I was out doing my thing with the family. So what do you have on to discuss today?
So first of all, how was your spring break? What's going on? How was it?
Good. We went to Universal, got rained on. Got back our son.
Hey, nothing like spending $1,000 to get rained on, right? To walk around in rain all day.
Yeah, and get soaked every day. Yeah, no, that's pretty much what we did. Good. My son got back and he's actually he got sick. And then now I think Mercy's getting sick. So good.
I posted a little story about that this morning as I was walking in, and I was having a conversation with my wife last night. Maybe I just my memory's going as we get a little older, but like I don't remember like having a winter that's like I'm not saying it was overly cold, just wet, but it's just been like wet and rainy, like canceling like sporting events, just like bleh. Like I feel like the rain just kind of like drags your energy, drags your attitude. Like I'm over it.
So am I.
And I feel like we're not going to get spring now, which is like, I feel like in Vegas, we're always complaining because it's too cold. Then we're complaining because it's too hot. There's like 4 months out of the year, the two in between, it goes from winter to summer, in between it goes from summer to winter. And I feel like we're about to lose our 2 months of just like, oh, this is gorgeous, perfect, don't change weather. And next thing you know, we're going to look up and it's gone from raining to 110.
It could be.
It's giving me nightmares, bro. It's giving me nightmares.
Is it giving you nightmares?
No. But,
no.
But it could.
I like that. No, but
no, we had a good spring break too. It was good to get out with the family and get away and kind of recharge a little bit. But I had a 6-hour drive each way, and yeah, when you get a lot of windshield time, and of course drove back in rain, just can't even get away from it. But one thing that I've been thinking about, and it's something that keeps popping up in my brain lately, and I want to get your thoughts on the word. Okay, I'm going to throw a word out there, and I want you just to start verbalizing what's going through your head when I say the word consistency.
What I do not have.
Right? See, that's perfect, because we just driving, think about it, and we came back and we had a baseball tournament with my boys this weekend, and they're 11 years old, and I find myself talking to them and taking kind of real world situations and growing them up a little bit, trying to teach them to be young men, not just like about playing baseball, but like how to treat each other, how to go about your job, like putting in the work in practice is like putting in the work. Like we go, we get our education, we listen in on webinars, we go visit, speakers and stuff to try to increase our knowledge base. And, as realtors, obviously we got to legally, we got to do our continued education. Right. And then when you get out there and it's almost like game days, like stepping into a listing appointment, stepping into that buyer's consultation, that's like, all right, game on, let's put that training to work. And, talking to the kids over the weekend, and we played overall really well, but we had one bad game. And, as I was talking to them, I found myself preaching the word consistency to them. Like, listen, guys, there's nothing wrong with our team. You guys are a great bunch of kids, studs out there. We're doing everything right and practicing in most of the games. We just have to be more consistent. And it dawned on me about 30 minutes later, like on my ride home after our Saturday game, I'm like, man, talk about preaching to the choir, right? Like what if we listen to ourselves sometimes? And I listened to that David Goggins, his newest book, and he says sometimes, like when a friend comes over, I'll just turn on like my phone and record. I'll be like, I just go. I'm gonna record you, but just go. And then he makes them listen to themselves again to make them hear that. And it's almost like, I was kind of like replaying my conversation with these kids in my head, and I'm like, man, what about you, Aaron? Like, where's your consistency on a daily basis? Do you have a consistent morning routine? Do you prospect consistently? Do you post consistently? Do you eat nutritionally, like consistently? Do you hit the gym consistently? Like, it's not about our work, but it's like, it made me just kind of think of like that word and how that word can literally change your life.
So you're absolutely correct. It can
Okay.
change. But I think that's the biggest struggle.
Sure.
Which to me is amazing, because we know in our industry, right? In real estate, how much money we can make if we're consistent, if we do the job consistently. And when we're building a team, we preach consistency. When we're coaching new agents as a veteran agent, we're talking consistency and do these things. But then we find ourselves not being consistent. So what is the key to being consistent?
Very good question.
Is it have it in your calendar, right? Is it have it? So one of the things it's funny you mentioned this today, because I saw this morning when I got up at 4:30 to have coffee, and they were talking to JJ Watt. They were interviewing JJ Watt.
Oh, man.
Was interviewing him. And he said, hey, is it true, the rumors that you were in bed by 9 o'clock every single night and up by 4? And then you had your routine, your breakfast, your workouts, everything you did on a daily basis during your playing career. And is that what made you great? Is that what made you the player that you were during your professional career? And he brought up the same word, consistency. So he didn't want anything that happened on the field to be a result of him not being at his best, whether it was not eating properly, not working out every day, not doing the things, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough everything. So he preached consistency. He's like, well, I retired and I still go to sleep at 9 o'clock and I still get up at 4 o'clock because it's become a habit. So I think that consistency starts to become a habit. And then once it becomes a habit is when then you can say, I've mastered my day, or I've mastered my routine. The problem I think we all run into is we all get in, as a kid, it's easy, right? Because you coach kids, you coach baseball, right? And when you're like, we have practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then we have batting practice on Fridays, and then we have games on the weekend. And that's what they're used to, and that's their consistency. I know at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, I'm going to have practice for 2 hours, then I go home. And I'm going to do the same thing on Thursday. Friday, I have batting practice, and then Saturday, I have tournaments. So we give them a consistent schedule, and it's on their schedule. This is what they have to do. Yet we don't do it for ourselves. And then now we struggle with, well, how do I get a schedule? Because things happen. Well, what do you do when a baseball player doesn't show up on a practice because something got in the way?
Yeah. I think that's one of those things. It's case by case, because there's obviously there's rules, right? Like, you miss for this, you miss for that. Like, it's kind of like school, unexcused absence, or, you call out for work, like there's consequences. And so I think that's where it comes into play, there's obviously, at 10, 11 years old, there's situations that come up, but ultimately, when people miss for those things, there has to be some type of penalty and, some type of consequence,
So for your player, let's say you have a player that misses practice every single Tuesday, right? And the reason that he misses practices on Tuesdays is because, let's just say he can't get a ride on Tuesdays, right? So we know this, right? He can't get a ride. His parents have to work late on Tuesdays. They can't get him to the ballpark. do you just give him excused absences, or is it his responsibility or his and his parents' responsibility to speak to somebody else on the team that maybe lives in the area that says, hey, I'll pick you up to go to practice?
Yeah, see, I get torn there, right? And I think that's how it goes into work too. But to answer this question is that I think if you're playing at a competitive level, right? Like, so if you're playing on a club ball, travel ball type team where you got 10, 11 guys that are, that could be on the field at any given time. And these are the schedules that we're given, right? And we know you can't make it. I think it's one of those things that you've got to exhaust all options, right? Like I get it. As an 11-year-old kid, do I expect that 11-year-old kid to call, parents and friends to get a ride? No, but I do think, as the parents buying into the system to begin with and committing to the team, I do think there's that sense of responsibility to be like, hey, listen, Tuesday is an issue for us. We both work late. We obviously don't want to be missing practice. Is there anybody that can help out? And I think that those parents ask, and I've had those parents ask, I had one of my friends over the weekend. He's like, hey, listen, we have some commitments on Sunday morning, and we have the other kids and stuff. Can so-and-so get a ride with you? Done. Absolutely. No way. No problem. Right. We pick them up for the tournament. Great. So I think it goes back to that old thing. Like, if there's a will, there's a way. I think people look for excuses not to be consistent, like today, it's raining. How easy would it be to be like, you know what? I'm just going to pour a cup of coffee, sit inside, kick my feet up, and I'll answer a few emails, but like it's the rain, right? So I think it's the kind of the same thing. Like, if you've gone out there and exhausted all options and nobody lives by you, nobody can help you out, then, hey, listen, as long as that kid, we've contacted, we've been in contact, we've had communication, they've tried everything, there's no end in sight, and that kid shows up for the other two practices and just busts his tail, I'm not penalizing that kid, right? I feel like that's out of their control. Now, if it's just lack of effort, like if that same kid now shows up on two out of the three practices and just like, like, I'm done with that. Like, you're showing me no consistency and wanting to get better. You're showing no commitment to the team. And I think the same thing goes into business.
So okay, so going into business, we control that asking of the parents.
Right.
We control that. So we control, hey, am I going to come into work and get on the phones today? Am I going to set appointments? Like, what is my true goal for the day? What do I have to do to have a win? Now, but what we tend to do, and I notice how I'm saying we, because I fall into that group as well. We get in our head. So, for example, we were talking about posting this morning. We don't post online. Well, then I get in my head, well, I'm not comfortable posting. Maybe I don't like my voice or whatever.
Right.
Which is, if I talk to people in person, which I talk to everybody in person, it's the same voice everybody hears.
Right.
This is when I record it. Now I'm hearing it.
Right.
Different to me.
Right.
But we control that consistency. The same thing is we control what we do in our days and what we do in our morning routine and what we do. So are we becoming that kid that doesn't have a ride and can't get a ride just an excuse? Or are we finding another reason not to be consistent?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, like going back to the JJ Watt thing, I basically, what I heard you say is that JJ Watt and I have the same wavelength. We have the same mindset because we're just stellar performers because we're thinking.
You guys are built the same.
Yeah, we're basically the same person. We're basically the same person.
You are JJ Watt.
We're basically, and as a Cardinal fan, that just excites me. Like,
exactly.
JJ Watt and I are basically the same person. Yeah. And I think you're right, because I think going back to what you said earlier is that, having a plan is fine. Like, right, we can all get out this giant whiteboard and, buy a new planner, buy a giant whiteboard, buy all these fancy markers, do all this stuff, and we can write down this massive plan. But if we don't consistently follow that plan, that structure, and turn that plan and those steps into habits, like you're saying, I think it's very easy to get derailed, especially in an industry like this, where it's like, you come into work today, like, who do you report to? Right? Like, where do you punch the time clock when you walk in the front door? You know, like you don't, right? So it's like it's so easy, and that's why this word like consistently keep coming up in my head this weekend. It was like, if we don't hold ourselves accountable or find someone to help, like, build a team, build a strong, like you and I think we can help hold each other, accountable to some degree to be consistent, and if you don't have that, and maybe that is why they say, what's the stat, like how many agents fall out in their first year or within their first 2 years? It's because they don't have to come in and clock in. There's no manager overseeing their production to making sure they're doing it's on them, and like you said, I'm as guilty as anybody. I've had my days where I come in here and I've done 487 walks around, this little cubicle of an office, watch Sports Center for 2 days, like watch the baseball game, just because you're just like, you haven't committed to your schedule for the day. You haven't built those habits because you're so inconsistent on how you have that routine that, a lot of people just find themselves in quicksand. And I think that's the unglamorous side of real estate people don't see. They see all this other stuff, but they see like, man, if you want to succeed in this, like you got to be a tough SOB, and you got to have some accountability factor on yourself.
And I think that the part of it is everybody, right? We all look for what's the path of least resistance, right?
Yeah, 100%.
How can I get to the number where I have to get to in order to maintain my family? We're not even talking about like becoming uber rich or not, just maintain your family, pay your bills, have a normal life. Like, how do we find a path of least resistance? Which to me is amazing.
Frozen? Are you frozen? Oh,
I don't know how this jumped out, but it jumped out.
There you
go. So what we're trying to figure out is how do you do that? Because if you had a job, right, you would have to consistently come in and do your job.
Exactly.
You would have to.
Or you get fired. Or you get
fired, or you get written up, or whatever.
Yeah. Consequences.
Right. But we come in and we're like, okay, well, you know what? I know that you should post content 3 to 4 times a day. Right? Let's just say 3 to make it easy. 3.
Sure.
Why don't we do it? Well, because there's other things going on. We know we have to make X amount of phone calls. We have to talk to so many people. We have to make appointments. We have these are things we need to do. And I think we all sometimes, we sit around and we say, okay, well, you have the spectrums, right? So you have somebody that comes in and says, I'm just going to post everything on social media, and that's how I'm going to get my appointments.
Right.
Reality is that's not where your appointments are going to come from. Not all of them. You're going to have to talk to people. But do we master that time? Do we so for instance, I got in at 8:00 today. And I made a couple phone calls and I already set one appointment for this week. But the problem is, am I consistently going to finish this and go on and set at least one more appointment today? Or am I just going to be like, I got my appointment for the day, I'm done. And that's where the problem lies. Or what is it that we're going to do in life and in general to be consistent? Like, how do you do that? So do you master your morning? I mean, there's all kinds of things. There's the Atomic Habits, there's mastering your morning. There's different books and podcasts and people you listen to. But how do you actually implement?
And I think it goes back to one of those things. I've read Atomic Habits. I've read Master Your Morning. And all of these, I don't think there's any one magic book, one magic pill. I think they all have some good tidbits. I think they all start to run the same too. I mean, you type in like consistency or routine or something like that into like an Amazon or, something, you'll find 187 books, right? Like everybody's written a book on that and they're similar to the same. But I think what it ultimately comes down to, and I think to answer your question, is that I think you have to look in the mirror. and you got to find out if you're willing to commit to doing it at all costs, and what are those consequences if you don't. If I don't get here at 8 o'clock and prospect for 2 hours, regardless of if I set 0 appointments or 5 appointments, what are the consequences if I don't do that today? Probably nothing, right?
I can tell you the long-term consequence.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going, right? Today, probably the consequences are 0, right? Maybe even at the end of the week, the consequences could be 0. But in 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, when you look up at your pipeline and you find out that you've got 0 escrows, you've got a mortgage coming, you've got a car payment coming, you got, in my instance, I got a kid who busted his bat this weekend. Okay, so now I got to figure out how to get my son a new bat, right? And fortunately, that's not going to be an issue, but that's not my point. The point is that like as life comes at you, bills don't go away because you've decided to be inconsistent or not do your job. So I think, to your point, I think for somebody, they have to dig deep down and find what motivates them. And for some, it's it's a lifestyle, it's a vacation, it's paying your bills, and I think that if you can't look that, and we're all guilty of it, I'm guilty of it some days too, and making some transitions in from my other businesses to this business, I've seen where my inconsistency has cost me or could cost me, and I have to continue to get better with that. But I think ultimately, you can read all these books, but if you can't look in the mirror and you can't get yourself up, pull yourself out of bed and be like, hey, I've got to hit boom, 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 boom by 10 o'clock. Then from 10 to 12, I'm boom, 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 crushing. Like I've got that routine where I'm not saying, okay, well, you know what? I know I'm supposed to prospect at 8:30, but this email came in. And then next thing you know, that one email turns into 4 emails, which turns into, it took you to a website, which that website then turned into social media, which then reminded you about something. And now it's like 11 o'clock in your day and you haven't stuck to your routine. And I think that's what gets people in trouble. So I think ultimately, you have to look in the mirror and be able to commit to what you're doing, to whatever it is, whether it's a baseball game, whether it's, selling real estate, selling insurance, having a landscaping company, whatever it is. I mean, you gotta commit to the process and be consistent about it.
Right. And I think that's the problem is we find, and again, I think that's part of finding the path of least resistance, right? So we know that it's uncomfortable to be on the phones all the time, right? No, I love being on the phones and I love talking to people. It's not the most comfortable thing to do is to be on the phone. It's just dial and dial and dial and dial and dial.
Right.
However, right, if you look and you analyze what is it that you're afraid of, right? It's not you're afraid of doing it because you're not, let's be honest, you're not going to get stabbed or killed or no one's going to come and shoot you because you made a phone call. But what's going to happen is because we're looking for the path of least resistance, you get an email that says, hey, this is going on. So you're like, oh, I got to check into that. And then what you're secretly hoping for is that turns into something else. And you start chasing these things. Like
you look up as 5 o'clock and you haven't done crap.
And you haven't done anything. And you're like, oh, I'm going to go home for the day. That's, I think the fear that not the fear, but I think that's the mistake we all make. We have a consistent way of doing things and we don't have a consistent system as real estate agents because we're entrepreneurs, because we run our own business, because we don't really have. So really, if you don't have an appointment, what should you be doing all day?
Try to make an appointment.
There you go. That's what you should be doing.
Right.
And, I set my goal low. I'm like, oh, I got to make 2 appointments. I know I can make 2 appointments relatively quickly. I should be setting my goal at 5 or 6 per day if I don't have appointments that day. So that'll now get me to do more appointments because I'm setting more appointments and I'm making more calls and talking to more people. But I think that we tend to say, okay, like I just told you, I set 1 appointment, so I only have 1 more to do today. Well, really? What happens if you make 2 more today or 3 more today? How's
ahead of the game?
Day? How's that going to impact your month? How's that going to impact your week? How's it going to help other people? And then you have people that just don't want to make appointments, period, want people to make appointments for them.
Right.
Which then turns into another problem because what you're looking for is an easy way out. See, because we don't have a business where people just knock on our door. We don't have a 7-Eleven. We don't have a bar. We don't have a restaurant, even a salon where people are going to come in. So you just have to be there. You have to be there, have the door unlocked so people can come in. It's almost like what we do is we buy a 7-Eleven, right? We open a 7-Eleven and we lock the doors because we don't want people to come in. Because that's what we're doing by not making phone calls, not setting appointments, is we're actually just locking the doors so we can't talk to people.
Well, and I think maybe it's that cross section, you in a graph, where x axis means y axis. It's like, I think the point that everything sinks in is when the fear of the consequence outweighs the fear of the action. Yeah. Write that one down. Okay. The fear of the consequence meets the fear of the action, right? So like if I told you, if you were scared to make and I know you're not, okay. But if I said, if we polled a random agent, or it doesn't even matter, but let's just talk real estate, for example. And I said, listen, what's your fear in prospecting? Calling people. Okay. Well, let's say I said, you're scared to call 50 people, right? Yes. Okay. Well, what if I tell you is that if you don't call those 50 people, the consequence is you have to give up your car. You love your car, right? Yes, I love my car. Okay, so if I say that consequence, if you don't call 50 people, you have to give up your car. Now I think it becomes the reality is, okay, listen, my fear of the action of calling 50 people, or do I face the fear of losing my car? So I think that's where it finally, people have to get to that point to understand that fear of the action versus the fear of the consequences. Listen, I'm not losing my car. I'm more scared of losing my car than I am of making 50 phone calls. So I'll make the 50 phone calls, like when the kids are playing baseball. I'm scared to face this pitcher. Okay, well, would you be afraid to face the pitcher or fear that you don't get to play baseball anymore? Well, I want to play baseball. Well, then therefore, here's your only other option. You got to get in there and conquer your fear of facing the pitcher, and then you can play baseball. If you're saying, listen, the fear of that pitcher is far greater than of not playing baseball, well, then find a new career, find a new sport, find a new hobby. And I think that's where people have to get to in their brain, and they get to that divide.
So the word of this week is consistency.
Consistency.
What are you going to do differently this week to make you more consistent?
Why did you put me on the spot like that, dude? Listen, so I started this. I started working with a new coach, right? And he had this podcast, and he was talking to a guy who he's like zero in the pipeline, zero anything, and he had to change his life, and he had some stuff that he had to work through, and this and that. He said, so there was two things that he wanted to focus on and be more consistent on, was his health and his business, right? And so he said the two things that he committed to was starting. What was the simplest task? He needed a win. Right. And like, you go through like the Dave Ramsey school of thought, it starts with small wins and they snowball into bigger wins. Right. And his first nutritional goal is like, listen, I'm going to give up like the soda, the alcohol. I'm going to commit to drinking 1 gallon of water every day. Simple commitment. Right. But how many of us probably actually drink a gallon of water a day?
I don't.
Probably not. But how easy would that commitment be? And how more beneficial would it be to our nutritional state? Right. So my first commitment was I got my big old honking gallon. I know it looks monstrous, right? But it kind of keeps me on track. I know how much water I'm now, and I watch it and I monitor.
Mine is small and cute.
Yeah. So now you got to figure out how many of those you have to drink in a day. I had smaller ones, but then I would forget how many I've already drank, so I couldn't keep track. So I was like, I'm gonna do what this guy did. I got the gallon jug. It's got the times on it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, so my first commitment to myself is like, be healthier. And I really want to start getting back to the gym, but this was like, okay, let's start here. Now for work, I want to start my morning with, I want to get up before I even hit the office. I want to go through one of my coaching sessions to make sure, like I knock something out that's productive. It's going to get my brain working right. It's got me thinking. Whether I don't want to just show up to work and be like, okay, now let's start being consistent. Let's make those phone calls, right? Like, I feel like I got to jumpstart my brain, I got a dead battery every time I wake up in the morning, like the car is there, the battery is there, the engine is there, but we got to jumpstart that thing. And for me, that's going to be my consistent trigger starting this week is that, boom, I'm going to hit my coaching call first thing in the morning, crush that out. That's about a half hour, 45 minutes, depending on the day. Those are going to be my two personal and business related consistency commitments.
Awesome.
Well, I'm not letting you off the hook. What are you going to do?
So that's what I struggle with, right? So I'm a gung-ho overachiever.
Mm-hmm.
You say conquer your morning. So I'll grab a checklist. I'll have 40 items on the checklist. And this is what we're going to do every day in the morning. And I'll do it for 2 or 3 days. And then I stop doing it because it just gets tasking. So what I did find, though, oddly enough, is when I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, which I still get up around 4:30 now. But when I was consistently getting up at 4 o'clock and working out at 4 o'clock in the morning, like get out of bed, go work out.
JJ Watt style.
The rest of my day just got easier.
Yep.
Like it did. Like everything else that I did for the day was really not that difficult. Because getting up at 4 and going straight to work out,
it's the hardest part of your day.
It's the hardest part of your day. So, and I've been contemplating that for a month or so now. So I guess you just put me on the spot that this is what I got to start doing. I got to get up at 4 and start working out again. Because that just makes the rest of the day easy. Like when the hardest thing you're doing is working out at 4 o'clock in the morning, right when you roll out of bed, then the rest of the day just seems kind of easy.
Yeah.
So I guess that's gonna be my thing. I'm gonna start waking up, and I'm not gonna do what I typically do, which give you 4 or 5 things that I'm gonna do.
Right.
Then I don't do them. So I'm gonna start with one thing. I'm gonna get up and work out. I'm not even gonna say what I'm gonna do, whether it's gonna be the treadmill or it's gonna be lifting. It doesn't really matter.
Go for a walk.
Right. It's irrelevant what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do something every single day at 4 o'clock in the morning when I get up.
I love it. It's like those old, I think there was like, like when you hear these Marines, there's like one of that speech that's always floating around. It's like, they always start by making their bed in the morning. It's like, okay, you got up, you got out of bed, you did a very simple task, but it's done. You got a win. You started the day with a win. Like you're already on a winning streak to start the day. And right. I think it's a mindset. Like you said, I think it leaks into the rest of the day. I love it, man.
All right. So we have things to be consistent for next week, and we'll see how it goes.
All right, buddy. I like it.
Brother. We'll see you later.